And we're back once again, only on it's Last Call. Last Call of the Alcohol, only on the Last Call podcast.com. And join me here. Well, we're always blessed to have him on the show. We get him because he is a busy man between his preparing for the upcoming draft, preparing with doing his own podcast with Arrowhead Addict. And while he is blowing up, we're just happy to have him on. I give you from Arrowhead Addict and Chiefs analyst, aficionado, and also trash talker. I give you Price Carter. So Price, let's we're in a bye. So as we now are in a bye week, let's recap the season. They're 5-4. They've survived Josh Simmons not being around for a bit for personal reasons, 6-game suspension with, of course, Rashi Rice. We had injuries to Xavier Worthy. So why is it that even though we are 5-4, they're in the playoff hunt, there's still Chiefs fans who just feel like, man, this really sucks. This is a horrible season. Oh crap! The sky is falling, and Price got to talk us out of it because there's a lot of us who are just right now miserable.
Yeah, well, I really think, you use the term survive. That's probably where we start with just how the season started as a whole. Not only being without Rashee Rice, you knew that that was going to be tough as he's, kind of continued to be the catalyst of the offense, but you hoped at least you could pick up where you left off last year offensively with Xavier Worthy, and maybe he even take another step forward in his second year. And they lose him after two plays in Brazil. And, it didn't get any easier after that. But really, I think the thing that was hard about the Bills game and the reason why I think we're kind of back in this place where it feels like people are panicking, people are concerned, is because we want obviously recency bias. It was the last thing we saw, and now people are going to sit and stew on it for 2 weeks. But also, we wanted to believe everything that we had seen the last couple of weeks prior to the Bills game was the real team, and there was reasons to believe it. They get Rishi Rice back. They have a fully healthy offense for the first time in a long time. And granted, they did lose Josh Simmons during that time. Um, Jalen Moore was playing well. So we started to look at the Ravens game, look at the Lions game, which is the best win that this team has right now. How they demolished the Raiders and didn't even play in the fourth quarter in that game, and how they basically shut it down in the fourth quarter against the Commanders, and say this is who they are. They are this top three NFL offense and at least a top 10 defense. And then they had a chance to go and test that theory against the Bills, and they were proven wrong. A lot of the issues that have kind of plagued this team over the last couple of years reared their ugly head again. Protection became an issue. Now it's obvious why. They've got at times in that game they had three backups and an injured Trey Smith along the offensive line. Their only healthy offensive lineman was Creed Humphrey and Jalen Moore, and Jalen Moore is a backup. And the defense, some of the same familiar faces that have struggled in the same familiar places started struggling again, covering tight ends for Nick Bolton. Shamari Connor got picked on a little bit. The run defense and the pass rush wasn't there. So it kind of feels like everything we had felt the last couple of weeks was invalidated by that performance. And I think there was a sense too that the Bills were a lot more vulnerable than they might have actually been. First you want to give a hat tip to them. They played a great game. Cole Bishop turned into Ed Reed in that game. He's like been an objectively bad player, and he played out of his mind. Maxwell Hairston continues to, he had taken 12 snaps prior to that game in the NFL. He played really well, and obviously he's a first round talent. They're very excited about him. I think that there's a chance that this Bills team is going to surge as time goes on, especially defensively, because that's where they were definitely most vulnerable. But the Chiefs, that was one of those sneaky one-score games that it never really felt that close. It felt like the Bills probably could go get whatever they wanted offensively, and the Chiefs just continued to struggle to move the ball on offense. So overall, I think that's where they stand. It's all in front of them, I will say, for the Chiefs. I think the game in Buffalo was probably the last shot at the one seed, which honestly, it was kind of a miracle that the Chiefs were even in that discussion after the way that they started, especially when you consider all of their losses are to AFC teams who are in front of them. The Chargers, the Jaguars. The only loss that they have that's not an AFC contender is the Eagles game. And now the Bills, right? All those teams are in front of them. So I don't see a chance that they get the bye. But They still have the division in front of them. They're essentially going to have to go 4-0 in their last division games because they've only played two. They beat the Raiders and they lost to the Chargers week one. Huge game coming up in Denver at Mile High after the bye, and they don't even really get the big advantage of a bye week because Denver plays this Thursday tomorrow, and they have a mini bye for that game. So any sort of bye advantage that you have there is mitigated somewhat, and then Denver's got a really strong home field advantage. So it's all in front of them, but they're running out of margin for error. They're really running low on their ability to have some oh shucks games. And right now this team hasn't proven that they can execute at that level.
So let's talk about the offensive line. You figure will be fixed within a week now, somewhat, because Simmons is back. Smith should have some time to recover. Taylor should have some time to recover, and you're not going to trot out three backups. But let's talk about the other stuff right now. Like, if you were right now, let's say you are in charge of the Chiefs, how do you fix the defensive line, which we'll get more into later? How do you fix the running game? Like, is this coaching? Is this players? What is, I guess, the theme of the problems that are on hand for the Chiefs?
Well, 24 hours ago before the trade deadline, that was probably the most likely answer. I never thought the Chiefs were going to be uh, earth shakers this trade deadline simply because of their cap situation and because of their lack of picks that they have this coming year. But something like an Odafe Owe or a Keon Wyatt or a Draymond Jones, who were all moved, those all would have been nice acquisitions to see the Chiefs be in on, and they weren't ultimately able to do that for one reason or another. I think the Chiefs, if they want to try to sell you some optimism, they'll tell you that they're looking at Josh Simmons and Mike Pennell, who's back in town, as their trade deadline acquisition, since neither one of them have been around very much. And Mike Pennell already outsnapped Derek Nottie, but let's not act like the run defense was awesome against the Bills. James Cook is probably a top two back in the league right now, and that offense is really tough to cover just because of the ways that they can test you on the ground and through the air, out of heavy personnel. But yeah, the answers aren't there. And I mean, honestly, it starts with Chris Jones has to play better. There's just not really any other excuse for that. He is a top three highest paid player on this team. He is paid to be basically one step down from Aaron Donald. And right now, he's not close to that. And as long as he continues to not be a factor in games, because, he's always been someone who's been hit or miss against the run, but an all-world pass rusher. As long as he's not doing that, it's going to hurt everyone because his job is to be that level of player. And then you get the added benefit of George Karlaftis, who's actually having a pretty good season. And then, your role players like Charles Omenihu, like Mike Dana, those guys can do it. They lost Omar Norman Lott for the season. He was viewed more as a pass rush guy. He showed some flashes, but he's going to be out for the season. I think that they have to continue to play Ashton Gelati more and more simply because I'm not seeing it from Charles Omenihu. I've not seen anything from him that says that, he is rounding back into that form that we saw him be in 2023 before the ACL injury. Additionally, I think that they just have to continue to maybe leverage Chris Jones more and more like a normal pass rusher, where they're moving him around in stunts and gains. They've traditionally built a pass rush around Chris Jones where he picks his matchups and that sort of thing. I'm not necessarily sure that he should get that benefit of the doubt at this point. They're pretty fortunate with some of the stuff that they can do. They have a lot of guys that can move all over the line. Dana, Karlaftis, even Gelati can rush from the one tech or the two tech. They can even mug Leo Chanel up in gaps, and he is so big and strong that he really can make an impact and hold his lane against a guard. But yeah, the pass rush is a problem, and quite frankly, I don't see it getting much better. I don't think it's dreadful, and I think the Bills game isn't necessarily the best measure of it because they do kind of use that mush rush where we're gonna hold up run lanes and then have a spy on them and try to keep them in the pocket. But overall, we've not seen any sort of progress from this pass rush to say that they can really impact the passer without in the first 3 or 4 seconds, right? Like most of these sacks, they're borderline coverage sacks that the Chiefs are getting.
So let's go to Brett Veach. Here's a defense I'll say for people who wanted trades yesterday. unless you were going to get silly, which is what the Colts did, which is what the Cowboys did. You probably were like a lot of teams were not, the Patriots didn't get anybody, the Broncos didn't get anybody. You can argue the Chargers basically got, leftovers that nobody really want, and the Bills didn't get anybody. So is this Veach's fault that we didn't get anybody, or was this sort of the landmark where, oh yeah, if you want Brees Hall, that's a third round pick. If you want Bradley Chubb, that's a fourth round pick. If you wanted Quinn Williams, it's going to be a second round pick, Mozzie Smith, and a first round pick. And I'm guessing even Chiefs fans would go, yeah, that's way too much for all of that.
So using the term fault, I think is kind of a weird way to look at it, just because it's not. I think a lot of people they view these issues in a silo. They look at it right now. I'm at the grocery store, I'm hungry, I see that food, I want it right now. When in reality, this is much more like when you go to the grocery store and you do that like $200-300 run where you're getting stuff, and I'm gonna buy a bunch of meat that I can cook up later, and oh, I can use this chicken for several different things. And this is much more what the trade deadline is actually like, not that instant gratification. Um, the Chiefs have positioned themselves for several decisions down the road here that now led to where they are now. You can look at moves like the Chris Jones deal. You can look at moves like the Trey Smith, Nick Bolton. Those contracts are all part of the reason why they are cash tight right now. You can also look at kind of what their overall draft strategy tends to be, which, they've traded down twice in Brett Veach's history in Kansas City. They do not trade down actively. Some of the most active teams at the trade deadline, like the Eagles, are a team that make a habit of trading down a lot. Now, do I think that the Chiefs would have had some magical pick that would have gotten them something? Probably not, but that backlog of picks allows you to do stuff like Draymond Jones, like Odafe Owe, those type of moves. We're not. I don't think that the Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams moves were ever going to make a lot of sense, and it just puts them in a place, and that's not even talking about some of the frustrating process they've had at defensive tackle this year, where they let Mike Pennell go. He doesn't make the 53-man roster. They trade for Derek Nottie, a person that they let walk in free agency, who is quite honestly might be the worst defensive tackle in the league. He is on roller skates almost every time you see him on the field. And then they trade for Derek Nottie. So you send a draft pick to the Jets, not a huge pick, but a pick, and then the second Mike Pennell is released from the Bengals, he's back in Kansas City and outsnaps the guy that they traded for. That process is frustrating. I understand that they wanted to get Omar Norman Lott more snaps, but that's frustrating. Another really frustrating thing is the Chiefs free agency class this last year consisted of three players: Christian Fulton, Jalen Moore, and Elijah Mitchell. Jalen Moore contract has already paid itself off from the mere fact that when Josh Simmons stepped away, which is unexpected, he came in and played a decent left tackle. I think he got a little bit exposed in that Bills game against Greg Rousseau and Joey Bosa, but it was far better than what they had last year. And also keep in mind, like we were just talking, Jawan Taylor might not play in this game. So there's a chance that next week, going against the ferocious pass rush of the Broncos, that it's Jawan Taylor and Josh Simmons, or Josh Simmons and Jalen Moore. Christian Fulton has been a healthy scratch for the last 4 or 5 weeks. He is not playing. They're playing Noel Williams, the rookie out of Cal, over him, which I will say that's great that you've got a rookie who's beating him out. They didn't know that they were going to get Noel Williams whenever they signed Christian Fulton, but the fact that he's not even healthy or not even on the field playing and not active is a problem. I mean, he's got like $13 million guaranteed to him over the next 2 years. That's a problem. Elijah Mitchell, who they basically gave very similar money to what the Cowboys gave for Javonte Williams, or what the Panthers gave for Rico Dowdle. Elijah Mitchell, he honestly could be missing person. Like, put on an Amber Alert for this guy. We don't even know if he's on the team. I couldn't tell you what number he wears. And he should have been the guy that they went and played whenever Isaiah Pacheco missed this game. But instead, we're elevating Clyde Edwards-Helaire from the practice squad and giving him actual NFL carries in a game that's very important for the Chiefs. Why is Elijah Mitchell on this roster? Like, what is the point? If he is not going to be active in that situation, there's no point of him being on the roster. And you do that, you have that cap space occupied by those three players. It's real easy to see why they weren't able to make a move at the deadline. And those are kind of some of the process issues that are frustrating. Now, unlike some people in the kingdom, I have the wherewithal to understand that there are levels to these sort of things and that not any one move is everything. Those are some frustrating processes. Overall, Brett Veach is still a very good GM. I'm very confident in his ability to lead this team. I just think that there's some steps that they need to take as a front office to start getting ahead of the next wave. The first, that first wave was just bringing in talent to put around Pat. They've done that. That next wave was kind of getting beyond the years of Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and the high flying offense. They trade Tyreek Hill. That was a very savvy move. Who knows? There was a time there that they were trying to extend Tyreek again, but that Devontae Adams contract and Christian Kirk contract hit and it changed everything. I think that we're kind of getting to another place here where the Chiefs need to start seeing how they can move on from their own people. Because right now it looks like basically all the Brett Veach draft picks are getting contracts. They're giving contracts to Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Nick Bolton, Mike Dana. All those guys are getting paid. Are you going to pay Trent McDuffie? Are you going to pay Rashee Rice? That's coming up quicker than you might think, and they're already really up against it for next year's cap. Now there's some ways to alleviate that if Travis Kelce retires, if they redo Patrick Mahomes' contract, which is something that's probably coming due, if they cut Juwan Taylor, but that's just to get under the cap. We're not even talking about Trent McDuffie being on the roster next year. So there's definitely some steps that I think they need to take as an organization as they kind of continue to evolve.
So the McDuffie thing is interesting because there's two arguments. There is, yes, trade him, re-sign Watson, re-sign Leo Chanel, you'll get picks and everything. There's people like me that go, no, you re-sign McDuffie. You will probably lose Chris Jones in 2 years. He is a Pro Bowl player. And unlike Sauce Gardner, he's not a dog who won't tackle. I mean, there was a reason the Jets did that because they are blowing up and they're horrible. And Sauce Gardner just said, yeah, I want out. So how tough is that for Veach? And how tough is it also for him that there aren't relationships? Like, we talked about the Ottaway trade. Well, let's call it what it is. It is two brothers helping each other out. One trades a safety that was falling out of favor that he knows the Chargers want. The Chargers, get a pass rusher that's fallen out of favor from the Ravens, who is still good. And it's there is no, there's no, I guess, nothing to see here, but there is something to see because there's, a lot of there are relationships between a lot of, the NFL teams where this player, this coach knows this GM is friends with this coach and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes if you're Veach, there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, I think that the McDuffie situation, like you said, it is pretty interesting because I think the league perception of him is different than maybe what it actually is. I mean, I think a lot of people like, there was an article that was put out by The Ringer by Stephen Ruiz, and this article was a clown show. I'm not afraid to say that. I would tell that to his face. He had already declared the Chiefs dynasty dead, the slow, boring demise of the Chiefs dynasty after week two, when they lost to the Eagles. And one of the things he said is that the Chiefs, lost the Tyreek Hill trade and that they would, if they could do it over again, they'd have Tyreek Hill. And he pointed to the fact that the Chiefs didn't get a blue chip talent from the Tyreek Hill trade, which is preposterous. Trent McDuffie has been a first team and a second team All Pro the last 2 years. And when I approached him about it on Twitter, he said it's because McDuffie is a slot only. Whenever he was a second team All Pro last year, playing almost exclusively out wide, it's not like he sucks out wide. He's still a very good corner out wide, but he cannot. I mean, he is better inside the slot. That's definitively a fact. But I don't think that they get the Sauce Gardner package for him, especially because I wonder about how the contract played into that, where he already had a deal done. So I'm not sure about that. But I would think they could at least get a first and maybe a day two pick, like a first and a third, a first and a second, 2 seconds. I mean, you'd have to think about that, especially when you see what the Tyreek Hill trade infused for them and also who they've already paid.
At what point, Vo, do you have to worry about we're trading horses for ponies? I mean, if that's the case, let's just trade Patrick Mahomes in to the Seattle Seahawks for Sam Darnold and 5 first round draft picks. They'll do that. I mean, I get it.
Yeah,
you're
I
always
would
looking
say
for a
that
deal,
I
but
would
at
say
some point,
that
like you need stars, you need guys who are difference makers, and Duffy's one of the few prime guys you're looking at. Going, do we really want to give him up? He's one of the few difference makers on this defense.
yeah, I would say like you lean into what the team has been really good at, and that's drafting corners, especially like, going back to outside. Like next year, like there's a real situation that you already have your outside corners on the roster with Noah Williams, and if they feel confident they could play Christian Fulton, that'd be great. And slot cornerbacks can be had on day two regularly. You look at like Jacob Parrish for the Buccaneers, who's already, come in and is a very good starting slot cornerback. Those can be had, and this team has shown historically they are very good at drafting and developing corners. Really, I just bring this back to like they had this wave of players these last 2 years with Bolton, with Humphrey, with Smith, with McDuffie, with Karlaftis, Chanel's coming up, Brian Cook's coming up, Jalen Watson's coming up. That's a huge inflection of talent who's all basically coming due at the same time. They can't keep all those guys. The Patriots didn't keep all their guys. They have to move on from some of these, and they've basically made themselves where McDuffie is the guy it's going to come down to. I would be surprised if Leo Chanel's a weird eval because I think some people realize how like much of a strategic chess piece he is. But then you look at like he's kind of like Michael Hoyt a little bit, and like he didn't get much, so maybe the Chiefs could bring back Chanel. But I assume Jalen Watson's going to get a decent contract somewhere, and the Chiefs have a good track record with their corners moving on from the team, like Charvarius Ward, who went on to be an All-Pro somewhere else. I know the Jarius Sneed deal hasn't worked out, but that's more of a health thing than anything. The team has been very good at drafting and developing corners, and I think that if you limit it to a slot corner, that could be even better. I certainly don't want to see Shamari Connor take over that role because that's where he's struggled the most is in the slot. But the team views him as a slot corner and has used him there regularly as well too. So he's still in the roster. So I just think it comes back to like you cannot pay Travis Kelsey, pay Chris Jones, pay Patrick Mahomes, Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis. Like they've kind of made their bed and lay with it a little bit. And I understand that Travis Kelsey might come off the books, but like we said, the Rashee Rice contract's just around the corner. Who knows how you feel about that as far as character goes and as far as production goes? Because like basically what we've seen from him the last 2 years when he's on the field, he's producing like a top 15 wide receiver. And that is going to cost a lot. Do you let him walk? What does this offense look like without Hollywood Brown? He's going to be a free agent next year. You've not seen anything from Jalen Royals. Like there's just a lot of questions, and that's ignoring running back, who their only running back they have on the roster next year is Brashard Smith. So there's a lot of questions to be answered. It's just never easy building a team around a big quarterback contract like the Chiefs have. And I've just tried to explain this to people that like they see these teams that are very complete, like the Colts right now or other teams, and they say like, why do the Chiefs have all these holes? And it's because they've been paying like I can't really think of another team who's been paying. I guess the Cowboys, probably the only other team that's been paying their quarterback for this long. Even the Bills, the Eagles, some of these other teams, they're still not quite in that life cycle of where they're paying the quarterback tax week after week, year after year.
So the defensive line is going forward, and you and I have talked about, have mentioned this in our DMs. When do they evolve? And I get it. Spags knows more about football than I will ever know. He is one of the greatest defensive coordinators. He is a genius in terms of shutting down quarterbacks. He likes an outdated system where bigger is better, where I want big, thick edge rushers. I want guys who are close to 300 pounds. And as we've seen, the league is becoming more speed. Yeah, basketball on turf. I want a guy who is 255, 245, but can just blitz the hell out of a tackle and get right by him. So I know this year is a wash, but going forward, what does Veach do? I mean, does he just draft a bunch of guys like a Cassius Howell, a David Bailey, and just force them on Spags? Do they keep doing the old route? Like, you hate to say it, is Spags basically the problem here, even though he's a great fit for defense?
I do think that there's reason to think that there is some disconnect between Brett Veach and Steve Spagnuolo when it comes to the defensive line. They have been objectively kind of weird with the defensive line over the years. They draft Derek Nottie, and he, despite what Chiefs fans want to rewrite history, at one time was a good nose tackle for them. That was a plug and play that made sense. They bring in Mike Dana. Even Mike Dana wasn't quite a Steve Spagnuolo guy, like a little bit smaller than he likes his edge rushers, but he's worked partially because he sets a great edge. They bring in George Karlaftis. George Karlaftis has been the one other success story. And that draft had a ton of defensive talent. That was a great pick. And he's thrived in the system. We know Chris Jones has been here and kind of what the whole thing is built around. Other than that, there's just been a lot of oddity around the Chiefs and what they do with their defensive linemen. You bring in Felix Anudike-Uzomah, who really wasn't a Spags guy by prototype. He basically gets a redshirt year where he hardly ever plays. And they ask him to put on weight, and it cost him probably one of his best traits, which is explosiveness. Even this year. They bring in Omar Norman Lott, a guy who was a pass rush win rate guy who played very few snaps at Tennessee, but was explosive as hell when he was there. And they ask him to bulk up and play more of a true one tech, which is kind of confusing because that's not really what he was at all at Tennessee. And Ashton Gelati is again he's a little bit closer to Felix in size. I think right now he is, profiling very Spagsy. You can see the pursuit and the intensity that he has, but he's not quite like you don't see a pass rush plan with him right now. It's more of just bull rush and speed rush, and that's about all he has. I do think that it's not just body sizes. It's using players in roles that make the most sense. Like some of the best pass rushers in the NFL, they have a combination of guys. They bring in Josh Uche last year, and it's like, okay, wow, they're actually going to kind of do this and, have a pass rush plan guy who is just a pass rusher only. And again, he got the Elijah Mitchell treatment. It's like you couldn't even find this guy. He's dead ass playing off-ball linebacker against the Broncos in that Week 17 game simply because they needed bodies. So here's the thing. You live with Spags, you die with Spags. And it would be nice to see them adapt, especially because I think one of the things that the pass rush continually struggles with is the fact that they don't have people who can win quickly. And you look at some of the best pass rushers in the NFL, they have those guys. They have Nick Benito. They have players who can bend and get up the arc. I think this draft, as you mentioned, a couple of names like Cassius Howell, I think some of those guys will be interesting. Cassius Howell is a Kansas City guy. He's from this area. He's having a great year. Who knows if the Chiefs would be in position to be able to draft him? But overall, I do think that there is reason to wonder what the plan is here long term. And also I think they gotta like start thinking about life after Chris Jones. Like the Chiefs have also not really seemed willing to go get that just pure one tech guy. They had interest in Mazi Smith a couple of years ago. Thank God I mean they didn't do much better with Felix Anudike-Uzomah, but that's been a wash. They were reportedly maybe kicking the tires on Tavondre Sweat. That didn't come to fruition. Of course, he has off the field issues, so the Chiefs got to get in on that. But yeah, I think that there's reason for pause there to say, what are they doing along the defensive line? And how can they maybe revamp it? Because it seems that they struggle, and the continued running back to guys like Charles Omenihu, like Derek Nottie, that to me is one of the things that has got to change. Like I would be totally okay to not have Mike Dana, not have Derek Nottie, not have Charles Omenihu on this roster next year, just for the sake of trying to get some injection of youth and versatility in the room.
So and this won't be this year, but going forward, event, do you let go of Spags? Because as you said,
Oh no,
he
no,
likes that's because that's the
I
problem. He wants these guys. He trusts them. He knows them. He does not like smaller guys. So again, if you're Brett Veach, how do you do this when the defensive, coordinator is like, yeah, I really don't want, guys under 270. I need my biggins. And if he doesn't want to adapt, what do you do?
again, I think like truly Spags is, a Hall of Fame level coordinator, and I still think he is one of the best game for game plan coordinators in the NFL. I mean, he's top two. Um, I I understand the desire of like, you want to. Here's the thing, like, and this happens all the time. Like, team people, we sit here and we watch regular season football. You watch the Seahawks carve up the Commanders on Sunday Night Football, and you're like, my God, like why can't the Chiefs have this on offense? Why can't they do this heavy play action under center Shanahan style system? And people marvel over it. And we all get it so excited and get on our podcast mics and talk about it. But then in January and February, who's going to be at the dance? Who are the people that are winning the games that matter? And it's this coaching staff. And again, like I know we have a desire to see some of the flashy things that other defenses are doing, but Spags has the ability to turn it on when it matters most. And I just don't know how you could ever upgrade from him unless you are simply like maybe it's someone who is a successor of his. And that, I mean, that's probably what happened. Like, my guess is if Steve Spagnuolo retired tomorrow, Joe Cullen, who's a former defensive coordinator with the Jaguars, would probably take over the gig. Um, I mean, that's probably where I would head anyways. But yeah, Spags is, he is a talent elevator. Realistically, you look at this season, the Chiefs defense, despite its performance against the Bills, which is probably their worst day, maybe against the Jaguars, but there was a pick six in that game. Um, there's what, maybe one, maybe two Pro Bowlers on this defense. McDuffie is still playing at that level, all pro, Pro Bowl level player. Chris Jones isn't. Nick Bolton isn't. Um, you know, he's making a lot of chicken salad out of chicken shit for the talent. And part of that, it is built in his image. But hey, like again, the results, you're willing to take those results based on the process.
All right. So this is the toughest one we have, I'd say, Josh Simmons, because we don't know what's going on. And look, we probably never will. One of those people who believes sometimes people should not have to know everybody's business because there's stuff you wouldn't want to know. There's still a lot we don't know about Josh Simmons, why he took off, why he disappeared. There was no official reason, just his personal reasons, which we believe is family, but we don't know. Should this be a concern? Because on one hand, I get it. Look, if it's family, you got to take care of family. They are the only people who will back you up no matter what. On the other hand, you and I both work, so I don't know if we said, "Oh yeah, we have a family issue," we could take 5 weeks off during the busiest seasons and go, "Yeah, we're just going to disappear." What do we make of this? And should this be concerned about Josh Simmons going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think you certainly have to like pay attention to the timing here, right? Like Nate Taylor, who covers the Chiefs for ESPN, he had put out a report a couple of weeks ago that Josh Simmons was still planning on returning around the bye week. That's ultimately what happened, right? But also like, hey, Jalen Moore's getting his ass kicked out here, buddy. We need you to get in here, and need to get you in here now. That is one of the things that seems to have a correlation. I will say that Josh Simmons, when he was on the field, I think you are elated about the performance he has. Funny enough, Jalen Moore's graded a little bit better according to Pro Football Focus, but also until this week, Jalen Moore had played a much lower level of competition than Simmons had as far as pass rushers go. And then if you look at the film, if you look at the advanced analytics, the amount of help that they were supplying to Jalen Moore was much more than Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons was trending towards being left on an island as much as any left tackle in football, some of the elites in the game. They were treating him like a set it and forget it left tackle, and he was handling that quite well. Um, Up until this incident happened, you could not get anybody to say a bad thing about Josh Simmons in Kansas City. He came in, he attacked his rehab, he was ahead of schedule and didn't miss a day of camp. And not only did he not miss a day of camp, there was no sitting out reps, there was no walking around with the brace on. It was full send for him. And he had really, really taken advantage of that. And not only that, but the football character too. He was out there grinding, he was fighting. You saw him, overcome adversity at times with certain players and come back. You see him going like 18 miles an hour down the field to tackle a safety, Andrew Makuba, in the Eagles game, and then this happens. It's hard because there's so much of this that we don't know. I know that there were several well-connected draft people that had reported that there were some maturity questions or some character questions around Josh Simmons. Now, was that Brett Veach who was telling them that, so he wanted him to fall? I don't know, man. Ask the Commanders how they feel about taking Josh Connerly over him. Ask the Texans how they feel about Ariante Urshry, who they traded out of the first round pick and took with their second round pick instead of passing on Josh Simmons. I think that both of them would probably like a do-over on that. Was this part of this? And again, there's so much we don't know. Is he a guy who just doesn't love football? You know, there's some guys that you hear that talked about, is football important to them? Is this something that you can be obsessive about, have an unhealthy obsession about? Or is this something that you just do for work? At the end of the day, we're never going to know probably what was going on with Josh Simmons. We're not going to sit here and speculate. But to answer your question, yes, you cannot just disregard this, right? No matter what it was, it's something that has to be in the back of your mind all the time. Same with Rashee Rice, right? Like, if we're talking 2 or 3 years down the road and we're talking about a contract for Josh Simmons, this has to be in the back of your head. Is he a guy that could just walk away from the game at like 27 or something just because? Is he a guy who could do this again? And obviously they know more about it than we do. Was there something going on with him personally that created the situation? Again, not to like pry, but there was a player, Deion Henley, who played in an NFL game who lost his like cousin or his brother to murder. L'Jarius Sneed played in a game a couple of days after his brother's murder. You know, I'm having a hard time coming up with a family situation that is just 4 weeks off. Now, here's what I say. We all work jobs that offer FMLA, which is something that apparently Chiefs fans didn't know existed because they're like, my job won't let me off of work because of personal reasons. It's like, well, actually, you can. Um, but, you know, like I'm having a hard time concocting the situation that necessarily makes sense for that, especially whenever you consider like this is a millions of dollars resource and asset that the Chiefs has invested in. He's their starting left tackle. And I think maybe this plays out a little bit different if Jalen Moore wasn't holding down the fort so well. Again, going back to the why is this happening right now situation. But yeah, long and short of it, you cannot disregard it. You cannot just completely ignore this and say it doesn't matter, because I think it does matter. But at the end of the day, it, they are a better team with him here, and I still think it's full send for him as far as the talent and as far as the player. And if the Chiefs, no matter what, even if this turns out to be more than just an occurrence, it was a worthwhile pick because of the talent that he is on the field, and you just don't get those guys at pick 32.
The running back room. I think if we talk about defensive line and people will be going ballistic about that, the running back room is another one where people are going ballistic about this. And I get it. There's two sides. As Stephen A. Smith said, you don't want to take the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands. If you are giving it to a running back, that means the defense is already probably going, yes, we got our job done. Patrick's not going to throw 18 yards, 20 yards, 15 yards. Running backs are overrated, as a guy named Michael Felger in Boston is saying. You know, they're obsolete. You still need them. So, how good is this running back room? Is there any way they can fix it, or is this going to be one of those things that they're going to look and go, yeah, why do we bring Saquon Barkley when, once again, why take the ball out of Mahomes' hands? We just, we have the best quarterback in the world. We should not have to rely on running backs.
I think it's just really frustrating that the Chiefs overall have just really failed to bring in any sort of like difference maker at running back over the last couple of years. Isaiah Pacheco is kind of continually uh, shown who he is, and that is like basically a replacement level player if we're talking about like baseball, right? Like he is the classic replacement level player at running back, and he has proven time and time again that he cannot stay healthy for 17 games. Kareem Hunt has been great in short yardage, but he is not a guy that you want to build your run game around. He is his best role is a part-time player who's going to, come in on short yardage and maybe goal line work, and he's a decent pass protector. The Elijah Mitchell of this is again frustrating just because like if the Chiefs had brought in Rico Dowdle or Javonte Williams or pick any running back that really has signed over the last couple of years, this running back room would be enough. It'd be fine. And instead they choose to pass on that. And then also, there was a spot in the draft where they selected Jeff Bassa, who has been a special teamer only, and he has not really done anything else. That would have been a spot that they could have looked at some of these names in the draft who, none of them have really taken off like crazy. But what would a Trevor Etienne look like in Kansas City? Like, could he bring more juice than what they have? Well, yeah, because Elijah Mitchell's not playing. Basically, you're in a situation where could someone they brought in be more than Elijah Mitchell and Clyde Edwards-Helaire have been for this offense? It's a resounding yes because they've given nothing. And that's the frustrating part. And you look at what the Bills have done for Josh Allen. And again, we're doing the thing where we're romanticizing the team that loses to the Chiefs every year. But they have made Josh Allen's life incredibly easy in Buffalo. The wide receiver play is rough. I do think that that's something that they have tried to address with Amari Cooper, Keon Coleman, Josh Palmer, Curtis Samuel. It's not really worked, but they've given him a first round tight end. They have another good tight end at Knox. And then they hit the easy button for him time and time again with that run game. You have to honor and respect that run game, and that makes Josh Allen's life a lot easier. He had 3 incomplete passes against the Chiefs on Sunday. That's easy. They do not do that for Patrick Mahomes, and we see the teams continually show like no team faces more light boxes statistically than the Kansas City Chiefs, and they can't do anything with it. How good does the Chiefs run game have to be to get that to start to change? What level of player needs to be brought in? That's why, a lot of Chiefs were clamoring for Breece Hall yesterday. The Chiefs weren't willing to go up to a third round pick. Connor Hughes reported that the Chiefs offered a fourth. Um, I'm okay with that, not trading for Breece Hall, because I think a third round pick is pretty steep for a guy that the only time that I would have been okay with a third round pick is extending Breece Hall. But then you get right back to that conversation. Breece Hall, Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey, Nick Bolton, Trent McDuffie. Like, how many guys is this team gonna play? How many guys are they gonna pay? But they certainly need to make a difference maker move. And I sincerely think since the Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick, they've been kind of scarred. And this team, I mean, for better or worse, they sure learned their lessons the hard way. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Patrick Mahomes does a quarterback sneak. His knee gets dislocated in a freak accident. I mean, how many times does Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts get up after running the tush push and they're just fine? But because of that, they refuse to run a quarterback sneak. They pick a running back in the first round and it goes terrible. And then guys behind him, like Jonathan Taylor, end up being better players. And now they won't invest anything but a seventh round pick in a running back or pitiful free agency dollars. And they saw the Eagles in the Super Bowl, who were in on a running back difference maker in free agency. So I think you got to start asking, like, when can we start making this easier on Patrick Mahomes with the run game? I understand that they've got great pass catchers right now, but you don't know if Travis Kelce's going to keep playing. He leads the NFL in receiving yards for tight ends right now. So he's playing really well. But are Hollywood Brown going to be around? Is Tyquan Thornton going to be around? Is Xavier Worthy going to take another step? Like, the questions. I think that they need to continue to try to find ways to make this better for Patrick Mahomes long term as he continues to age and change.
Final question. It's not a Kansas City Chiefs, but it's more personal for you and I. And this is YouTube versus ESPN. Yes, we saw that all of a sudden on Friday, October 30th. If you had YouTube TV, guess what? Disney pulled everything. They pulled ESPN, they pulled the Disney Channel, ESPN2, FX, FXX, and yes, ESPN decided to say, no, you got to pay the premium or else. This is one of the few things that can unite everybody. If you're a Bills fan, a Chiefs fan, a Patriots fan, even a Jets fan, this is getting pissed. This is pissing people off now. Like, okay, we sign up for YouTube, so you want to have cable. Now it seems like we have to have cable because you need to either have this package or this package or this. How angering is it that even now, after all these years, we're still getting held up hostage by ESPN or some other network because if they don't play ball, they'll yank your stuff from this TV conglomerate.
Yeah, I mean, we're really kind of entering this new phase of sports media and I mean, I think there's a bigger discussion even in general about just the content that people are consuming for sports media. I've long hypothesized that shows like Get Up and First Take and all these garbage, terrible shows with people who don't know the sport at a real level are mostly powered by sports clips and sports bars who just run that stuff endlessly while the girls cut hair and the guys serve up a bourbon neat, no one's actually who's actually watching this stuff. It's almost like dead internet theory a little bit. And then the real content is the actual sporting events. And we've already seen this in the college level. I mean, I'm not a big college basketball guy, but I constantly hear my friends who are college basketball people struggle with the Big 12, package on ESPN Plus or the SEC network or Big Ten network. And, I follow Nebraska pretty closely. And I know that my friends who follow their basketball and volleyball, they struggle with their games. It just feels like this is headed towards this spot where how far away are we from having like pay-per-view? Like, what if the Super Bowl was a pay-per-view event like boxing? That ended up being the death of boxing. I know you're a big boxing and mixed martial art guy, so I'm not going to dabble in stuff that I don't
No,
know
look,
a whole lot
it
about.
is what killed boxing in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Even UFC is now parroting from pay per view to they Paramount Plus bought the TV rights for 7.7 billion. So they finally are getting away from that. But yeah, it's and again the bigger question is what happens if a kid just goes screw this? I can just watch clips on TikTok and Twitter.
Oh, dude, you're hitting on something like I I sincerely have been shocked by some of my friends who are close to my age or more who just flat out don't watch games. They watch Red Zone and then they watch highlights and stuff like that. They don't sit down and watch and consume a game from start to end. And I think that's why we see some terrible analysis of box scores and things sometimes where people aren't watching the games. It's unfortunate, but it feels like watch the games is something that I say to people often on Twitter. And yeah, like I think that there's a real chance here that they have a shot at losing people. They'll get this settled. They will. But I mean, really just comes back to like I am someone I do not use YouTube TV. I use Hulu Live, and I've been pretty impressed with it. But it's not cheap. It's $100 a month. I like it because I can stream from my phone, I can record, and it's allowed us to remove some other streaming services that we have because I've cut the cable, and we can record. Free pub for Hulu Live, I guess here, but you can record TV shows, so we don't have to subscribe to some of the Peacock or Paramount for some of the shows that we like to watch. Um, but in the same breath, like, cable nowadays, like a satellite cable package, that's going to run you close to $200+ a month to get all this stuff. And even then, are you getting you're not going to turn off Netflix. You're not going to disconnect Hulu or HBO because we've come accustomed to being able to fire up our shows and watch them whenever. And, the ability to binge. I mean, there's a real situation. If you want to get everything and be able to stream, you're talking $300-400. That is insane to pay for that. And, I'm probably close to about 150 to 160 for all the streaming services that we use. That's not cheap either. And I still struggle to watch Royals games. I pay out of pocket for their standalone streaming service to watch Royals games because of disputes that have long been going on in Kansas City over their regional network. So that's a whole other element because baseball's regional network part of this is a total disaster. But I think Monday Night Football was a wake up call to people to realize that when they went to go fire up their Monday Night Football, it wasn't there. And yeah, I think, YouTube TV seems to be one of the leading popular streaming service for people. And I know that they do some cool stuff with their quad box and stuff like that. But I'm just thankful that I was able to have it. And, I don't know, were people able to watch it on Disney Plus? Do you know
Yeah,
if that?
you're able to watch it on Disney Plus or because you had the whole package. But once again, if you're trying to cut, like I don't have Netflix. I just
Uh-huh.
have Amazon Prime, which I get, Paramount Plus. I have now DirecTV. I don't want to have to pay, and I get Peacock for free, but I don't have to pay for all of a sudden, like, oh, I gotta get Netflix. Oh, I gotta get this. I gotta get that. Next thing you know, as I said, I'm running a $300 tab per month on just all these damn apps like Apple, like HBO slash, Warner Brothers slash, Apple Plus slash MGM Plus, like all this, like, do people in all these leagues, whether it's Brett Veach, whether it's somebody from Jonathan Kraft, whether it's even what's up, John Henry, do they understand like you are going to eventually run this into the ground because people are just going to go especially new generation. No, I don't want to pay for all this, so
Well, and it
make
really
it free
feels
on
like
TikTok.
And it really feels like the products itself, like they're leaning on what the products are themselves. Like the NFL, it's like the automotive industry or whatever. It's too big to fail. They could put the NFL. Wednesday at 2 a.m. on, I'm trying to think of the most obscure, TNT or Life Network or Home and Garden Television, and they'd still pull numbers because it's the NFL. Um, but a lot of these other products, like I think that they're starting to realize that they are going to have to adapt to survive. You look at some of the sports that are kind of propelling themselves. Formula One, like the Drive to Survive, was a huge success, and their numbers skyrocketed, and they got a huge deal from ESPN. UFC has continued to succeed and thrive, and you talked about how adaptable they've been. They've taken their fights unique venues. They're making themselves available to streaming services that pulls people in. Um, Baseball, even, and I did just trash baseball a little bit with the regional networks, but their playoffs were extremely successful viewership wise, partially because they've changed their game. They're increasing the pace of play. They're making the product a better product to watch. I think the NBA is someone who has to kind of think about this a little bit with how many times guys are going to the foul lines and watching people just shoot 53s a game. I think that that's something that they got to consider. But yeah, I do think that we're seeing people are continually competing for their attention, right? Like our attention spans are ever decreasing. I feel like it's crazy for people. Like I purposefully sometimes put my phone in do not disturb mode and turn off the lights in the house, and we're going to watch a movie, and I'm not going to get distracted. People's attention spans, they're shrinking, right? Like everything's 10, 15-second clips now because of Reels and TikTok and that type of stuff. Like these companies, these entities, these sports, they're going to have to continue to compete for people's attentions. And I think, bringing it back to football, red zone's part of that. Like people watch this, they don't understand the context of the game. They just see that Tua Tagovailoa is in the red zone. Never mind that it was a prayer ball that got him there, and they've done nothing on offense the whole game. But you sit there and you think like, hey, the Dolphins are moving the ball. I saw them on red zone.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, it's all the time we have. Once again, always on a pleasure having on the show. I give you from Arrowhead Addict, Chiefs insider, reporter, analyst, and sometimes trash talker. I give you Price Carter. So, Price, once again, where can fans check you out at? Where is your podcast? Where is Twitter, the Instagram? Where can fans check out more of your great work, especially Arrowhead Addict?
Yeah, so arrowheadaddict.com is where the written work is. I don't write as much as I used to simply because I'm just podcasting and doing video work a lot more. But I'll be putting out my big board here next week, my top 25 prospects for the Chiefs as I'm starting to get into the draft. You can find me on Twitter at Price8Carter and then Arrowhead Addict on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. My show is Mondays, The Intangibles. I also help with our game day coverage, pre, post, and halftime shows as well too.
Price Carter, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always an honor and a pleasure having you on the show. We come back. We got a lot more going on here. Only on it's Last Call. Last Call of the Alcohol, only on the Last Call Podcast.com.